Welcome, listeners, to 21st Century Dating Decoded, the official podcast of Speed Mingle. I am your host, Don. Today, we examine the digital infrastructure that increasingly governs contemporary intimacy. Consider the consumer habits that define our daily lives. Whether purchasing a new software application, selecting a vehicle, or subscribing to a digital streaming platform, the preliminary step remains uniform. We utilize the demonstration, initiate the test drive, or register for the complimentary trial period. Modern consumer culture dictates that we must evaluate a service extensively prior to making any definitive commitment. Inadvertently, this exact methodology has permeated our interpersonal relationships. Episode Introduction: Trial Runs: How Modern Dating Became a Social Simulator. In this episode, we analyze a fascinating yet increasingly taxing phenomenon: the transformation of dating from an organic courtship into a virtual sandbox simulation. The contemporary dating ecosystem is undergoing a profound structural transformation, driven by an intersection of prolonged digital fatigue, economic pressures, and systemic social anxiety within the emerging adult demographic. Data from the 2026 National Dating Landscape Survey indicates an unprecedented shift in romantic engagement. 74% of single women and 64% of single men between the ages of 22 and 35 reported complete romantic inactivity, or a nominal number of interactions over the preceding 12 months. Faced with an attrition of interpersonal competencies, where only approximately one-third of young adults express confidence in offline courtship, a tactical behavioral trend has emerged across digital networks: practice dating. This methodology involves the intentional pursuit of face-to-face encounters with partners to whom the initiator feels no initial attraction or long-term alignment. Rather than seeking romantic compatibility, the practitioner utilizes the encounter as a low-stakes interpersonal simulator to refine conversational mechanics, mitigate social anxiety, and build psychological stamina absent the paralyzing fear of rejection. This treatise provides a rigorous sociological and ethical analysis of the advantages, systemic disadvantages, and profound moral dilemmas inherent to this phenomenon. Overcoming anxiety and removing social masks. For populations immobilized by the high-stakes pressure of contemporary mating rituals, utilizing a trial-run framework offers distinct, measurable psychological benefits. Mitigation of the performance paradox. Operating under the explicit assumption that romantic compatibility is entirely off the table fundamentally alters an individual's cognitive and psychological framework. In a traditional dating scenario, the perception of high stakes and intense mutual attraction triggers a hyper-optimization mindset. This state causes individuals to engage in intensive impression management, leading them to self-edit, offer artificial validation to the other party, or actively suppress their authentic opinions to secure approval and minimize the risk of rejection. The subconscious mind treats the interaction as a high-pressure performance where any misstep could break the romantic illusion. Conversely, when the pressure to impress is systematically removed from the equation, the practitioner experiences an immediate and profound drop in performance anxiety. By neutralizing the desire for a specific romantic outcome, the psychological burden of evaluation vanishes. This liberation shifts the cognitive focus from external validation to internal alignment, enabling the individual to engage in the interaction as their completely unfiltered, authentic self. Consequently, this shift fosters genuine connection, grounded in real transparency rather than curated perfection. Reconstruction of interpersonal fitness. Mastering the nuances of face-to-face communication demands continuous behavioral reinforcement and real-time social conditioning. For a generation whose formative developmental milestones were severely disrupted by digital insulation and the forced isolation of the COVID-19 pandemic, low-stakes in-person encounters serve as a crucial, risk-mitigated training ground. These interactions function as a safe laboratory where individuals can systematically reconstruct and refine fundamental offline habits that cannot be replicated through a screen. Through deliberate exposure, practitioners can rehabilitate and master critical interpersonal competencies, including decoding nonverbal architecture, relearning the mechanics of maintaining appropriate eye contact, interpreting subtle micro-expressions, and reading the complex choreography of body language and physical posture. Sustaining conversational momentum. Developing the psychological resilience to navigate natural conversational lulls and awkward silences organically. Overcoming the compulsive urge to retreat into the safety of a smartphone screen. Calibrating vulnerability and attention. Mastering the delicate calculus of self-disclosure, knowing what to share and when, while simultaneously practicing deep, active listening that goes beyond merely waiting for one's turn to speak. Navigating contemporary social etiquette. Developing fluid confidence in handling the unspoken financial and logistical anxieties of modern gathering, such as seamlessly managing bill splitting, tipping dynamics, and boundary setting without friction. Calibration of behavioral pattern recognition. Actively stepping outside of a familiar romantic comfort zone and engaging with a diverse spectrum of personalities acts as a powerful catalyst for personal growth. When individuals deliberately interact with people who fall outside their typical type, they sharpen their relational intuition and diagnostic capabilities. Approaching these varied encounters with a healthy balance of openness and objective observation allows singles to analyze behavioral patterns in real time. Rather than viewing a date merely as a high-stakes test for long-term compatibility, it can be approached as an opportunity to observe human behavior. This shifts the focus from anxiety to insight, making it much easier to spot critical behavioral indicators early on. Green flags. Recognizing positive psychological traits, such as emotional maturity, active listening, consistent boundaries, and genuine empathy. Red flags. Early detection of dysfunctional or manipulative behaviors, including love bombing, overwhelming attention used to accelerate intimacy, or subtle boundary violations. This proactive experiential learning builds a robust emotional defense mechanism. Over time, it helps individuals protect their psychological well-being and make healthier, more deliberate choices in future relationships. Ultimately, dating is a nuanced social skill, and like any complex interpersonal ability, confidence is forged through practice and repetition. The current shifts in how people approach dating reflect a broader cultural movement. It is less about a frantic search for a life partner and more about a collective effort to rebuild social ease, practice vulnerability, and reclaim authentic human connection in an increasingly digital world. Systemic disadvantages of the practice date. Despite its theoretical utility, translating clinical training modules into the messy, resource-constrained reality of human dating introduces significant friction. The contemporary romantic landscape has increasingly fostered a phenomenon known as the transactional dating pipeline, a psychological and behavioral trajectory that fundamentally alters how individuals seek, form, and maintain romantic connections. This pipeline often begins with a practice dating trajectory, wherein individuals engage in romance not with the immediate goal of finding a life partner, but as a low-stakes means of gaining social experience, boosting self-esteem, or casually passing time. However, when modern dating infrastructure, chiefly driven by algorithmic, choice-heavy applications, merges with this casual approach, it systematically funnels participants into a hyper-optimized consumer mindset. In this stage, human beings are effectively reduced to commodities, evaluated via checklists of superficial metrics, financial compatibility, and social status. Romance begins to mirror a marketplace transaction, where people are constantly shopped for, compared, and treated as upgradable assets, fostering a pervasive illusion of infinite choice. As this commercialized mindset solidifies, it inevitably triggers a profound sense of emotional detachment and disillusionment. Because individuals are trained to view potential partners as disposable and replaceable commodities, they instinctively erect emotional barriers to shield themselves from the fatigue of the endless cycle of rejection and superficial encounters. This defense mechanism, while protective in the short term, breeds cynicism and strips the dating process of vulnerability, authenticity, and spontaneous joy. Over time, this chronic emotional insularity and consumerist framing culminate in a foundational inability to sustain long-term intimacy. When conflict, boredom, or the natural imperfections of reality inevitably surface, individuals conditioned by the transactional pipeline lack the patience and emotional resilience required to build deep, enduring bonds. Instead of leaning into the vulnerability needed to repair a relationship, they are compelled by the consumer mindset to discard the current connection and return to the marketplace, trapped in a self-perpetuating loop of superficial attachment and enduring isolation. Inefficient resource and energy allocation. Dating within today's challenging economic environment has increasingly evolved into a capital-intensive venture that extends far beyond simple monetary transactions. While couples often attempt to mitigate these financial strains by opting for low-cost alternatives, such as meeting for coffee or walking through public parks, the true cost of modern courtship remains exceptionally steep when accounting for non-monetary investments. Every single encounter demands a heavy expenditure of temporal capital, emotional energy, and the personal presentation required to make a meaningful first impression. When individuals repeatedly allocate these scarce, non-renewable resources to romantic interactions that are fundamentally designed or destined from their inception to be brief and terminal, the result is rarely a sense of fulfillment or discovery. Instead, this constant drain of energy on short-lived connections serves to accelerate the already pervasive phenomenon of dating burnout, leaving participants feeling depleted rather than revitalized. The paradox of choice and market commodification. The contemporary landscape of courtship is increasingly defined by Generation Z's well-documented propensity to optimize every facet of existence, a hyper-rational framework that stretches from professional networking into the deeply personal realm of platonic friendships. By extending this calculated transactional mindset into romance, there is a profound risk of entirely sanitizing the courtship process. When dates are reduced to structured self-improvement exercises or algorithmic evaluations, it fosters a consumerist approach to intimacy that strips human connection of its essential spontaneity, vulnerability, and mystery. Ultimately, this rigid prioritization of efficiency over emotion backfires, severely impeding an individual's capacity to experience a genuine romantic spark and transforming the pursuit of love into a sterile corporate merger. Habituation to emotional mediocrity. When individuals consistently seek out low-stakes, low-attraction scenarios, they inadvertently habituate themselves to low-yield relationships that offer little emotional fulfillment. This pattern often functions as an overcorrection, a defensive mechanism designed to avoid the inherent risks of deeper emotional investment. Consequently, people settle into an administrative acceptance of stagnant situationships, choosing the predictable comfort of ambiguity over the anxiety of the unknown. By prioritizing safety over substance, they construct a barrier against the profound vulnerability required to navigate high-stakes, authentic attraction, ultimately rendering genuine intimacy too intimidating to confront. Over time, this behavioral loop alters an individual's romantic expectations and threshold for satisfaction. The repetitive cycle of engaging in superficial connections trains the emotional palate to accept mediocrity as the baseline, making the prospect of pursuing a deeply resonant partnership feel overwhelmingly daunting. Because true intimacy requires dismantling these self-imposed defenses and risking emotional exposure, the transition from a low-yield dynamic to an authentic relationship feels less like a natural progression and more like a psychological threat. As a result, the safety of a connection devoid of expectations becomes a self-reinforcing trap, stalling personal growth and perpetuating a cycle of relational stagnation. Ethical dilemmas. Deception, asymmetry, and human devaluation. The most critical critique of the practice dating phenomenon centers on interpersonal ethics, as these behavioral experiments are almost exclusively conducted without mutual consent. The phenomenon of using modern romance as a consequence-free training ground introduces a troubling ethical dimension, primarily characterized by a profound asymmetry of intent. Within this dynamic, one party enters the arena seeking authentic, vulnerable human connection, while the other utilizes the interaction strictly as an anonymous social simulator to refine their personal charm, boost their self-esteem, or experiment with relationship dynamics. By entering a shared emotional space with entirely hidden agendas, this setup establishes a highly lopsided, inherently exploitative dynamic that instrumentalizes human affection, reducing an unsuspecting person's genuine feelings into a mere laboratory instrument for another's self-improvement. This asymmetry translates into a damaging operational reality fueled by unintentional deception. Because a social simulator only yields useful data if it feels realistic, simulating real-world conditions requires the practicing partner to actively mirror romantic interest, validate humor, and perform emotional engagement they do not actually feel. This calculated performance inevitably cultivates false expectations, leading the unsuspecting partner to believe a deep mutual bond is forming. When the practitioner achieves their micro-goal or tires of the experiment, the simulation concludes, almost always resulting in an abrupt, unilateral cessation of contact, popularly known as ghosting, which inflicts profound emotional distress and psychological whiplash on the person who believed the connection was real. Ultimately, this behavior pattern triggers a severe psychological consequence, rooted in the paradox of practice. The core flaw of the social simulator strategy is the attempt to master the complexities of romantic intimacy while intentionally withholding vulnerability and maintaining zero emotional skin in the game. Real intimacy cannot be rehearsed in a vacuum of self-protection. By trying to do so, the practitioner inadvertently trains an insulated, detached methodology of connection. Instead of learning how to love, they successfully condition themselves to treat others as disposable commodities, effectively paralyzing their own future capacity for genuine relationships. By turning a protective shield into a permanent psychological habit, the reduction of an unwitting partner to a clinical test subject sparks intense cultural and psychological backlash. Finding out that one was utilized merely as a warm-up match to sharpen a stranger's conversational mechanics can be deeply destabilizing to an individual's self-esteem. The emergence of practice dating highlights a generation actively seeking to heal its collective social anxiety and break away from the digital numbness induced by algorithmic matchmaking. However, while getting these relational reps may cultivate a more poised conversationalist, doing so at the expense of another individual's genuine emotional vulnerability demonstrates how easily self-improvement can degenerate into self-absorption. Sociologists and relationship experts argue that these essential social competencies are more ethically and effectively developed through daily civil engagement, such as collaborating with professional colleagues, conversing with service workers, or participating in localized community organizations. Converting a traditional date into a covert laboratory experiment may temporarily insulate an individual from the risk of rejection, but it risks fostering greater cynicism within an already fractured social economy. In concluding today's examination of trial runs, how modern dating became a social simulator, it is evident that the architecture of contemporary romance has undergone a profound structural transformation. The contemporary dating landscape has evolved beyond traditional courtship into a series of highly calculated simulations, driven by the gamified user experiences of digital interfaces and the algorithmic curation of compatibility metrics. The preliminary stages of 21st century romance increasingly mirror the low-risk, high-iteration mechanics of a sandbox simulation. This simulated framework offers an undeniable buffer against vulnerability. By treating initial interactions as experimental trial runs, participants effectively insulate their egos from the psychological costs of rejection. When a digital microdate or a preliminary video interaction fails to yield positive results, users can seamlessly terminate the session, recalibrate their digital profiles, and immediately re-enter the matching queue. While conceptualizing romance as a social simulator maximizes operational efficiency and mitigates emotional stakes, it introduces a critical structural paradox. Authentic intimacy resists simulation. True connection fundamentally requires the precise element that a simulator is engineered to eliminate: uncontrollable risk. Relational resonance thrives not within pre-programmed parameters, but within the unscripted, uncurated spaces of raw human interaction. When individuals over-optimize for superficial alignment or treat prospective partners as interchangeable digital avatars, they risk filtering out the very friction required to catalyze genuine love. As you conclude this episode and navigate the modern dating market, we challenge you to step outside the confines of the simulator. Utilize technology as an initial gateway, but once a connection is established, disengage from the digital dashboard. Embrace the unpredictable chemistry, the spontaneous pauses, and the beautifully complex reality of real-time human engagement. The most substantive dimensions of human connection cannot be evaluated in a beta version. Speed Mingle is strategically positioned to offer the efficient frontier for this new era of dating. Our ecosystem provides a sophisticated suite of tools engineered to minimize superfluous risk, while maximizing opportunities for authentic connection, successfully transitioning users from aimless interface interaction to substantive relationship formation. Speed Mingle is currently transforming digital courtship through 4 distinct, intentional, and highly efficient modalities. Speed Mingle Anywhere, available globally, facilitates authentic, face-to-face video interactions from a user's private setting, effectively overcoming the structural limitations and anonymity of traditional swiping. Speed Mingle Social, launching this week in select markets, offers relaxed, non-hosted weekly gatherings at established local venues, designed to foster spontaneous, informal connections. Speed Mingle Happenings, active in real-life events, meticulously curated, dynamic, activity-based events structured to catalyze natural engagement without a reliance on conventional small talk. Speed Mingle One-to-One, launching summer 2026, provides personalized, low-pressure introductions with local singles whose pre-vetted interests ensure an efficient route toward foundational compatibility. Our institutional commitment is to deliver diverse asset classes for interpersonal connection, preventing users from concentrating their emotional capital into a single methodology. Whether you prioritize the digital efficiency of our premier online platform, the structured environment of a curated event, or the spontaneity of a social gathering, Speed Mingle offers a tailored strategy aligned with your relational preferences. A successful relational portfolio is invariably predicated upon intentionality and genuine connection. Headphone audio networks. Access high-fidelity audio streams of our program on the following global syndicates: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, and Deezer. TV broadcast and video networks. Watch premium long-form video presentations via Speed Mingle TV, YouTube, Roku, and Amazon Fire TV, accessible by searching for Speed Mingle TV Network within the Apps and Games interface. The HRB TV Network, our parent corporation's dedicated broadcast channel. Do not allow your romantic strategy to remain stagnant in an obsolete era. Secure direct access to all future segments and exclusive content by registering at 21st Century Dating Decoded.riverside.com. If you valued this briefing and found our discourse on abandoning prescribed dating narratives informative, please execute the following actions. Subscribe immediately to ensure you receive all future broadcasts. Provide a 5-star rating and review to assist other professionals in discovering our program. Forward this episode to an acquaintance who continues to utilize outdated, poorly illuminated photography, enhanced with obsolete digital filters. Their future romantic prospects will benefit from the intervention. Furthermore, we encourage you to secure your reservation at an upcoming Speed Mingle event in your municipality. Take the initiative to mix, match, and mingle to enhance your social portfolio.
Thank you for listening and watching 21st Century Dating Decoded, the official Speed Mingle podcast.
On the new Speed Mingle TV Network.